Hello all, myself Murshida Yasmin, Assistant Professor from SNS College of Physiotherapy. My today's presentation is about structure and function of cerebral hemisphere. Let's get into the topic. In this overview of human brain, the brain is divided into forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Forebrain includes the cerebrum, which makes up about 80% of the brain mass. Cerebrum accounts for the largest structure of the brain. Cerebrum consists of two cerebral hemispheres. One is right cerebral hemisphere, the other one is left cerebral hemisphere. These two cerebral hemispheres are connected by corpus callosum. The key role of the cerebrum is to control the higher cognition level and sensory processing and also the motor control. The gyri and sulci forms the surface of the brain. Gyri is elevated ridges on cerebral surface. Sulci is grooves between the gyri, which increases the surface area for the neuron, thereby increases the surface area of the brain surface. Next, the major sulci is central sulcus and lateral sulcus. Central sulcus, which separates the frontal and parietal lobe. Lateral sulcus that separates the temporal lobe. So, in which this fissures or the deep grooves which are present in the cerebral surfaces. Example, longitudinal fissure. In this picture, you can see right and left hemisphere with both sulcus and gyrus. Sulci are the grooves between the gyri. Gyri are the elevated ridges which you can see on the cerebral surface. The brain is divided into lobes. So, in this picture, you can see the lobes of the brain. Frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe and occipital lobe. These are the four major lobes of the brain. Each hemisphere is divided into these four lobes. Boundaries are defined by major sulcus and fissures of the cerebral surface. What do you mean by insula? Insula is hidden lobe deep within the lateral sulcus, and limbic lobe is the medial aspect of the cerebral surface which is involved in emotion and the memory function. This picture shows the internal structure of the brain, which shows the grey matter, white matter, ventricles, and the grey matter is the cerebral cortex and the basal nuclei, which is grey in color. The white matter or the fiber tracts that connecting the regions of association, commissural and projection fibers are all located in this white matter. The ventricles or the lateral ventricle lies within each hemispheres, and the blood supply for this internal structure is via carotid artery and vertebral artery. In this picture, it's clearly visible that the cerebral cortex and the corona radiata, caudate nucleus, and also the third ventricle, thalamus, hypothalamus, and a corpus callosum that connects both the hemisphere. Coming to the frontal lobe, a frontal lobe is the largest lobe which is anterior to central sulcus. The key areas are the precentral gyrus, which functions for the primary motor cortex, and the prefrontal cortex. So the Broca's area is located in the frontal lobe, and it is useful for the speech production, and it extends from the frontal pole to central sulcus. The function of the frontal lobe is to control the motor function, voluntary movements via primary motor cortex, and execution function by planning, decision making and problem solving. Personality and behavior regulation is also done by frontal lobe, and as I said earlier, Broca's area is located in the frontal lobe. So motor speech articulation is all controlled in the frontal lobe. Next, coming to the parietal lobe. It lies posterior to the central sulcus and superior to lateral sulcus. This picture, blue in color, shows the parietal lobe. So the key areas are postcentral gyrus, which is of primary somatosensory cortex, and superior and inferior parietal lobules are present in the parietal lobe, which is involved in spatial processing region. So this region is called a spatial processing region. The function of the parietal lobe is to somatosensory processing, which involves perception of the touch, pain, temperature and proprioception. And spatial awareness and navigation is all provided by the parietal lobe. Integration of the sensory information is done by parietal lobe. And the attention and perception of what is presenting in around our surrounding is all done by the parietal lobe. Next, coming to the temporal lobe. In this picture, you can clearly see the temporal lobe, which lies inferior to lateral sulcus, anterior to occipital lobe. So, the key areas of this temporal lobe are superior temporal gyrus, which is auditory cortex, and hippocampus, which presents in the medial to the temporal lobe. And an area called Wernicke's area is present in the temporal lobe, which is useful for the language comprehension. And it includes amygdala for emotions. Emotion control is also done by the temporal lobe. So what is the function of the temporal lobe? It works with the processing of the audition, which helps by hearing and sound recognition. And also memory formation. Hippocampus for the long-term memory is located in the temporal lobe. And language comprehension is done by the Wernicke's area present in the temporal lobe. And emotion and olfaction sensation is all they are located in the temporal lobe. Amygdala and olfactory cortex is used for the emotion and olfaction recognition. Next, coming to the occipital lobe. In this picture, you can clearly see the occipital lobe label. So, which lies posteriorly. It is a posterior lobe separated by parieto-occipital sulcus. The key area present in the occipital lobe are primary visual cortex, which is called as calcarine sulcus, and the visual association area surround the primary cortex of the occipital lobe, which is the smallest lobe in size when compared to other lobes of the brain. The function of the occipital lobe is visual processing. The processing of the vision is entirely located in the occipital lobe through interpretation of the sight, color and motion. So primary visual cortex is located in the occipital lobe, which receives input from the optic nerve. Thereby recognition of the visual sensation is done. The association areas which are related to occipital lobe are object recognition, depth perception. The integration with the other lobes for visuospatial task is done by the occipital lobe. Next, coming to the cerebral cortex layers. What are the layers that consist of cerebral cortex? It is a 6-layered structure, layer 1 to 6 with the specific cell types. Layer 4 is the input from the thalamus, and the pyramidal cells are all located in the layer 3 and 5 for the output. So variations by region can happen. Example, motor cortex has the thicker layer, which is a 5th layer. In this picture, you can see the layer. So, primarily the hemispheres are there and the sulci and gyri is pictured here. And after the cerebral outer layer, there are 6 layers which are arranged one by one. It is called as neocortex. Coming to white matter and fiber tracts of the cerebrum. So, association fibers which connects the areas within the same hemispheres, or example, arcuate fasciculus are located in the white matter. And commissural fibers called which connects the hemispheres, which is called as corpus callosum, and the projection fibers that connects cortex to lower brain and spinal cord is called as corticospinal tract. So these are having the role in communication and integration of the sensory impulses and motor output. Hemisphere specialization. So lateralization happens in left hemisphere, which is useful for the language, logical and analytical thinking. Then right hemisphere is for spatial, creative and emotional processing. Corpus callosum enables interhemispheric communication, which connects with the right and left hemisphere. So thereby it carries information from right to left and left to right. And split brain studies have shown that insights from severed corpus callosum has happened. So in this picture, you can see the visual auditory kinesthetic processing that happens from the top-down view. Let's clinically correlate with the cerebrum structure and function with the clinical correlation. The lesions in the cerebral hemispheres, which especially in the frontal lobe, cause personality changes. In case in parietal lobe, the neglect syndrome happens. The lesion in the temporal lobe causes memory loss, which is called as Alzheimer's disease. The lesion in the occipital lobe causes visual agnosia, which is the disturbance of the vision. Next, in case of stroke, it affects the one hemisphere causing contralateral deficits. In case if the lesion is present in the right side of the brain, the deficit will be there in the left side. Then epilepsy often originates in the temporal lobe of the brain. Clinical correlation related to low and common lesional effect. In case of frontal lobe, there will be an impaired judgment and motor weakness. In parietal lobe, if there is a lesion, there will be a sensory loss and spatial disorientation. In case if there is a lesion in temporal lobe, auditory hallucination and amnesia will happen. In case if the lesion is present in occipital lobe, blindness will be there in visual field. To summarize, here I have discussed about the cerebral hemisphere, the core of the higher brain function, and structures in which I discussed about the lobes of the brain and the cortex and the structures of the white matter and the functions which include sensory function, motor function and cognitive integration are all discussed in this chapter. And importance of this is to understand the basis of the human intelligence and behavior through the structure and function of the cerebral hemisphere. Thank you. This picture is about to summarize the overall class which I have discussed so far about the cerebral hemisphere structure and function. So, starting from cerebral hemisphere, we have talked about the lobes, gyri and sulci and cerebral cortex and white matter. Thank you for your time.